Hello.
Hi.
Thank you guys so much for coming today.
Hi.
My name is Stephanie, and what is your guys' name?
Sorry. I'm Ben.
Ben. It's nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. Yeah,
Ben.
I'm Susan.
Susan. It's a pleasure to meet you. Now tell me a little about yourself. Susan, tell me about yourself.
Well, I'm Susan. I'm 32-year-old, and I don't know. What do you want to know about me?
So tell me, what do you like doing for fun? What do you do for your career?
Well, I'm a little busy these days with my career, building career, and I'm a product manager. And so yeah, I'm really just busy working these days, and I don't really do much for fun. Like maybe sometimes hang out with friends.
Oh, great. And do you have friends in like the local area and around here?
Yeah, I mean, I have coworkers who come. We go to their place, they come to ours. So like, yeah.
Do you get involved in happy hour and things like that sometimes?
Sometimes, yeah.
Okay.
Like in between hours, yeah.
Okay, very well. And then Ben, for you, tell me about yourself, your career, or maybe things you enjoy doing for fun.
I am a 4th grade math teacher. I love that. I've been doing it for about 8 years now. Besides that, it's like some of my hobbies and stuff. I like doing, I like hiking and like nature, yoga outside, and I just like being outdoors, like a nature type of person.
Okay, great. A lot of the activities. Sounds really active, really
Yes.
out there. And so for 4th grade for teaching, how long have you been teaching for?
8 years. I
Oh,
think it'll
8
be
years.
8 years
Okay.
this year.
Wow.
Something like that, yeah.
That's amazing.
The same
That's
school.
really wow. The kids must love you.
I love them too.
That's great. And for project manager, you were saying, is that correct?
Product manager.
Product manager?
Yeah, I've been working for like 4 years now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Feels like forever.
Well, I'm building my career. It's not where I started. I recently got promoted, and like obviously the work, the amount of work comes with it, with the promotion, and yeah, it's like I think it's been taxing in our relationship.
Okay. And now, for your promotion, I wanted to say congratulations.
Thank you.
That
It's
is
been a year
amazing.
ago, but
But that's still fine.
Thank
That's
you.
progression and that's growth. I mean, for staying for
well,
school for so
that's not
long.
what he thinks, but thank you.
Of course, absolutely. I'm sure it's well deserved. A lot of work and a lot of
It
time
is a
when it
lot
comes
of time.
with
It
promotions.
is.
Now that I know a little about yourself, now do you have any children, a family outside of the both of you?
That's a
No.
great question, actually.
No, I do not want to have children,
Okay.
and that's an issue we had recently. And he just really loves kids, and he's been working with kids, and like,
And I'm ready.
and he wants us to grow our family, but it's just not the right time for me. It means the end of my career to me, and I am just not like ready to be a mom.
I mean, you're 32.
Absolutely.
When are you gonna be ready? Then?
It's not about age. I'm just not ready. I don't
Emotionally
want
ready?
to.
How are
So
you
No,
just to make
emotionally.
sure I have an understanding, now Susan, I'll get both perspectives. Is this one of the reasons that brought you here
Yeah.
today? Is the question and the thought and the conversation of having a child?
Yeah.
Okay. And then for Ben, is tell me a little bit about your understanding, so I can understand as well as what brought you here.
When we first started dating, we would talk about like how big of a family we would want, and we would like say like what the gender of the kids that we want, like in order, like all that stuff. And we've been together. I don't know if we mentioned this, but we've been together for about six years now.
6 years. Wow.
Yeah, and
Well,
she
those
just
things are
doesn't
just
want-
like
she just,
romantic things that we used to say.
so
It's
you
not-
lied about them.
I didn't lie about them. I just didn't have a realistic vision that I have now.
No, Ben, tell me. So you were mentioning the conversations that you were having before.
So I thought we were on the same page.
Okay.
We're 6 years in. I started, asking about kids and like where she was at about a year and a half, 2 years ago now, and nothing has changed. She doesn't want to have kids. She wants to just focus on her career. She doesn't want to have a family. She doesn't want to do any of that. And I feel as if I've been lied to and like tricked into this relationship because I thought we were on the same page, and now she just changes everything up. But I'm ready to have a family. I'm ready to have a kid. I'm ready to take that next step. And I feel like all she cares about is work.
Well,
Okay.
you don't.
So
have-
there's a discrepancy in the balance
Yes.
of the things that are wanted in the past and the present. Okay, absolutely. So to work a little bit with that, now tell me, Susan, I understand, now I understand both perspectives. This conversation seems to be frequent, or you can correct me if I'm wrong. Has it happened only sporadically, or
It happens every night after I get home after work, tired, exhausted. And when I got promoted, instead of being happy, his first question was like, when we're gonna like have our family, and like he wants me to be a stay-home mom because I know he's not really open about having a nanny and having a third person involved in raising our kids. So like I just know that if I ever get pregnant and have a kid, it means the end of my career. And I've been working so hard. And he's right. When we started dating, I was 26-year-old. I just graduated from school, and like it wasn't a big deal back then. And like that's what I thought I would want one day.
Absolutely.
But I changed.
Right.
I just
Life situations have been changing,
Yeah.
work circumstances have been changing, and this is a frequent conversation, even with all of these changes
Yeah.
that are happening. So then, Ben, if you could, and I know, Susan, you mentioned this happens almost every single night. So I want us to kind of go a little bit deeper into what that night or what a conversation would look like, because this is a very serious topic, and I think this is something really important to understand both perspectives of what can happen in this conversation. So Ben, when was the last time this conversation happened? Last night, okay. So take me through the night of exactly what happened like yesterday evening.
So I usually get home before she does.
Okay.
So I have some, I guess, like alone time, reflecting, or just like organizing the house a little bit. So it's been, I don't agree with her when she says we have this conversation all the time. It's just been frequent, like the last few months, because I've been waiting for 6 years, so I'm ready to have a kid. So I've been, I guess, initiating this conversation more than usual, but it's not always all the time.
Okay.
But so I come home, I organize the house a little bit, and I make us dinner. We usually go out, but since we've been fighting a lot, we don't go out anymore because it just ends up in this whole like scene. So last night, for example, I was making some spaghetti, and I think she came home like an hour and a half after me, and she's just, even with this like big promotion she's always talking about, she's just always in a bad mood when she comes home. And I remember she just like walked in, and she just like didn't even like kiss or hug me or just really acknowledge me with warmth.
I've been tired. I've been working 14 hours.
Now tell me, in that moment, it sounds like you already are anticipating
Yeah.
this that's happening. Now in those moments of anticipation of Susan coming home, what do you tell yourself? What's happening in those moments before Susan's coming home?
I get anxious
You get
because
anxious.
I know what's gonna happen, but I also like, I am fearful that I like can't get to her or like get through that wall, because I understand she has a busy day. I understand she works 14 hours. She's a busy woman. She's building her career, but I'm also dealing with kids like literally 8 or 9 hours a day and like a whole classroom of kids.
So it's a lot going on.
So we're both stressed out, but I just want to have a civil conversation with her without us like fighting about it, without her saying, no, I don't want kids. Like anytime she comes home now, and since I've been on this mindset of wanting to talk about having kids, I just get so anxious. I feel anxious, and I feel like a bomb is about to drop.
So you can anticipate the anxiousness and that increased level. And I know you used the expression the bomb is about to drop. So it sounds like a very stressful few moments even before Susan is coming home.
We're both so stressed out, and then I know we're talking about a stressful topic, and we're both just like not hearing the other person.
Okay. Now, and you recognize when Susan's gonna come home. So Susan, let's say, for example, last night, so Ben's preparing the dinner, the spaghetti, you come home, tell me what happens next.
So yeah, I come home and I had a really long day. My day started at 5. I had to get up and get ready to go, and then I had a meeting at 7, and it was a very important meeting, and he knew about that. I've been preparing presentation for that meeting, and like it was a very stressful few nights that I had, and I didn't get enough sleep. So and I came home at 8, so it was like a very long day for me, and it was very stressful at work, and I was just not looking forward to have like plan my future at that night, at that moment when I'm exhausted and I just thinking about sleeping. Like, and he brought up the matter of kids, like if I want a kid or not, and I just imagined like I come home this tired and exhausted, and there's a kid that I have to care for.
But it's
And
our
I was
kid.
like, no, it's our kid.
So that's what you were visualizing.
It doesn't have to be our kid. It doesn't have to be there. It's like a extra stress on my life.
Right. So it sounds like even before you were even getting home, this was already happening. These thoughts were already
Well, before
happening.
getting home, I would never thought he's that like I don't even have a word for that. Like,
Mhm.
how could you bring up such a stressful issue when you know I already had a hard night? I already had
Because
a
you
long
never
day.
want to talk about it.
So you come home, he has the spaghetti. Do you guys sit down for dinner? Tell me in the next few steps that you go
Well, I
on.
came home and like the food was ready, and I my first reaction was like, okay, like finally home sweet home, and like I can like sit down, relax, eat my dinner with my husband, and like everything gonna be fine. And then, as he said, he was building up these like thoughts in his head that I was not aware of, and then all of a sudden he started this conversation. I was like, oh my god, here we go again, not tonight. And then I just wasn't open to talk about it that night, and he just didn't have that understanding.
Mhm.
He just thinks that we have to talk about whatever is in his mind right away.
Because we
We
never
cannot
talk
wait.
about it.
Now,
We
tell
never
me,
let me talk
Susan,
about it.
I
The
mean,
moment-
you're spending so much time with kids. I don't understand why you want any
Because I
more.
want
So you're
our
sitting
kid.
down there. Ben brings up the topic of the conversation, and I know, immediately this is not something you want to talk about. So in that initial thought, what is happening in your emotions? What is going on within you? I understand it's not something that you want to talk about, but what's happening inside?
I just felt like he doesn't understand me. He doesn't get it.
Mhm.
And he calls me sometimes selfish, that I am all about myself and my career, but this is for our family. Like the money that I'm bringing in, we both gonna spend. Like we are planning to move into a bigger house, and like without my salary, anything, like all of these things would disappear. And I know that having a kid is like an extra financial responsibility, and how are we gonna do that if like I'm not there, I'm not working, and my salary is not there? How are we gonna afford a kid?
Right.
How are we gonna afford the life that we always wanted?
Mhm.
So like maybe when I'm like in 7-8 years, I'll be open to that, but not right now. And he just doesn't get it.
Now, you mentioned a little bit of
7 to 8
selfishness
years.
in the beginning of this. You were mentioning how sometimes he views you as being selfish. When you hear that, how do you feel initially when you hear those words?
I feel that he doesn't get it. I feel like we used to be really close. We used to have the same mind. He used to like just understand me without me even saying. Like when I started my career, one of the reasons that I could succeed in only like a few years and got 2 promotions was because he was there for me, and he supported me all throughout, and I really appreciate that. But
Right.
like right now that I'm really at a place that I can make something happen for our family, he all of a sudden he does that, and he
Right.
changed his attitude, and he's like he just won what he wants right away, and
Absolutely.
that's not something I can get.
Now,
Yeah.
when you hear the word selfishness, how do you view yourself and your emotions in this conversation?
Well, deep down I might feel like there's something
Please go on.
wrong with electricity.
Okay, there you go.
When I hear those words, like, I don't know, sometimes I internalize them and feel like maybe I'm a selfish human being, but then on the other hand, I see that, like, it just makes me angry that he wants me to feel that way, so I would give up and do what he wants to do. I feel like he's being manipulative and use those words to, like, really try to change me.
So it sounds like when you hear those words, and there's 2 parts of you, that you can either internalize this and almost believe that it's real, or there's another part of you that almost feels angry that these words are being directed towards you,
Yeah.
because it's not something that you're intentionally trying to do.
Yeah.
Okay, that's completely understandable. Now, Ben, so you're sitting here, you're at dinner, you're having this conversation, and you recognize Susan's reaction to this topic that you brought up. You're still sitting down, you're having the spaghetti. What happens after that?
My initial reaction is like, I knew it. Like, she wasn't gonna be open to talking about it.
Well,
She was gonna be
exactly. If you knew it,
hostile.
why would you?
Because I
bring it
still
up?
want to try, and I was like hurt and annoyed and tired, and I know she had a conference at 7 in the morning. Like, I know she was like really stressed out about that. It's not like I completely disregarded that. Like, I asked her how that went before I brought up the having a kid conversation, which of course she completely left out. But I also feel like in that moment, like when I was hurt and mad and annoyed, I also like kind of lost hope. So I just put my plate in the sink, and I remember I went back up to my room and I just processed for a little while, because I've been fighting with her over this for like over a year now, and like we've gotten nowhere. And as a result of that loss of hope, I'm like also feeling resentment, because like I said, I feel betrayed that she doesn't want to have a family anymore, even though we talked about it in the beginning. And I understand that she's building her career, but we've been together for 6 years, and I feel like this is the next step. I'm ready to take this step.
Right.
And I feel like if she's not, will she ever? And like, what are we doing then?
Okay. So is all of these thoughts and these emotions that seem to be happening
Yeah.
very quickly in a very short amount of time? You mentioned resentment, you mentioned anger,
A lot of things.
confusion, and this is all happening. And it's interesting because it seems as though you know the answer to the conversation, but you still want to have the conversation in the dinner session. And so once the answer to your question is stated out loud, it creates all of these feelings. Now, what do you normally do once you hear that? Because, right, these feelings have been happening
Yeah.
repetitively. What is it that you do in that moment at the dinner table? I know you said you went upstairs. What is
I
going
don't
through your
usually do
mind?
that.
Oh, you normally don't usually do
No,
that. What
my
do you,
back.
okay.
Yeah.
And what made you not do that this time? What sort of
It was
feelings?
like a loss
was-
of hope.
Okay.
I feel tired, drained. I mean, I still want to try. I still want to have that conversation in a civil manner, but I was just hopeless. I just felt like I was the only one really trying in this relationship.
Okay, absolutely. And that's a lot to handle as well, of trying to communicate those feelings. Now, in this time, which is different than a lot of the circumstances, you went upstairs. Do you normally have a strategy or something to cope with de-stressing from this conversation, which is very, very serious?
No, actually, but yesterday I went up to the room, and I remember I just sat there for a little, and I like self-reflected and like just kind of like felt all my emotions, and it helped temporarily,
Okay.
but I mean it helped me calm down, I guess. But all those other feelings I mentioned were still present.
Right.
Well,
And those,
I mean, the thing is, why can't you love me for myself? Why do I have to give you a baby so we can like continue
I mean, that's
loving
what
me?
families do. That's what couples
No,
now,
do.
that's
what we're
not
going to
every
focus
couple
on a
do.
little bit here is this resentment, because that's a word that you've mentioned pretty frequently. So when you start feeling that start kind of boiling and brewing from this conversation, what else is happening? What do you make sense of that emotion specifically?
I know where it stemmed from. The betrayal aspect.
Right.
The lie
Betrayal?
to. Yes, you lied to me since the beginning of our
It's not.
relationship.
It wasn't a lie. Things changed over the past 6 years.
Completely changed like that, a
Yeah.
180.
Now you were saying betrayal. Is
Yeah,
how you feel.
betrayal, like she
Okay.
lied to me. She keeps talking about
Like
how
it
people
cheated on you.
change, feel like it. And basically like I feel like she was a completely different person in the beginning of the relationship, and now her values change, her priorities change, her feelings change. It's like how can you not feel like you've been lied to? Like you've had this like persona on. So that resentment stems from I feel betrayed in this relationship with someone who I thought I knew.
Okay. So a lot of this emotions that you're feeling, that you're having, and that's being portrayed and projected onto Susan from the conversations from the past.
Yeah.
Now, when you had these conversations in the past, did you feel like you were able to handle them differently, or have you been handling them always the same?
Sometimes it depends on the situation.
Okay.
So I feel like how my mood was prior to the conversation,
Right.
everything like really plays a part in how I'm gonna react.
Okay.
Yesterday, like I said, we were just both extremely stressed out.
Right.
And I feel like that really, really affected how we both came to the situation, you know?
Mhm.
But
Absolutely.
I do, I guess, I'm proud of how I handled the situation afterwards. Even though I still felt those feelings,
Right.
I did take a step back.
To decompress.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Susan,
Do you
after
wanna pause the session? Right now?
so when Ben went upstairs, I understand that you were still downstairs. It was right after the conversation. What did you do? What was happening in that very moment?
Well, I tried to keep focusing on my work and ignore what happened.
Mhm.
I didn't go after him because I knew we were gonna have a fight. So I went to a different room and started like working on a different presentation that I have in a few days.
Mhm.
And yeah, and he mentioned that he felt that he's being betrayed, but
Mhm.
like planning for this career was something that we both did. Like it's not like I didn't include him into the process. He was always there, and he knew that's what's gonna happen, and that's the price of that.
Right.
But he kept ignoring it, and then now I just don't want it to ruin years of hard work at this
Right.
point.
Absolutely.
And I just don't understand why he can wait a few years longer.
And
for us to be
dedication
able
that
to
you
learn.
put into the work.
Exactly.
Now, you said you took that moment in that space to go to your work, and to kind of use that and to start doing something in between that space of realizing that Ben had gone upstairs and what you were going to do next. What were you feeling in that time?
I tried to kind of forget about it.
Okay.
I really tried to, I don't know, maybe suppress the feeling and
Okay.
deny them, or I don't know, how would you?
Kind of push them down a little
Yeah.
bit?
I just didn't want to think about it because there was, as he said, there's it seems like this conversation is a never ending conversation, and
Right.
there's no solution for that. You want something, I don't want something, and I don't know, it's one of rare moments that it's black and white. You either can have it or not have it. There's no in between. We cannot have child and not have child. So there's no solution such that.
There's very
So-
little gray area for
Yeah,
this
so I
circumstance.
don't know how we ever gonna solve that problem.
And that's not a problem. We will get there, and we can work through it, and especially because you both are here, and that's the most important thing. Now, I wanted to focus a little bit on the suppressing of those emotions. What initially makes you, what initially in that moment, that might not be something you do all the time, but just in that moment for that sake, what initially made you decide, and what were you thinking that this is a moment I'm going to push these down, this is a moment I'm not going to recognize this?
That's what I've been doing in the past few years. That's the only way I could get through my career, and being a woman in a field in business world, and it's just predominantly men career, and then I could make it because I could suppress my feelings, a lot of things,
Mhm.
and I could sacrifice a lot, and all these sacrifices that I made for our family, he's seeing them as me being selfish and being so focused on my career and not our family. But I see it differently. I see I made all these sacrifices. I could have been one of those stay-at-home wives and just enjoy my spa days, but I'm not. I'm working 14 hours a day for our family, for
Right,
something.
for something
What family?
bigger.
We don't have a kid.
Now, tell
Well,
me,
it's
Susan.
not okay, one problem that I have, and he really gets on my nerve, is that he sees family only if you have kids.
Right.
And
So there's a different definition. of
exactly,
family.
he doesn't, it feels like he cannot love me anymore without a kid, and I'm not, and I just don't want that.
It's a different definition. Now, I want us to take into consideration what happens if we didn't suppress those emotions. What happens if we opened that Pandora box? What emotions do you think you would have felt in that moment?
Well, I probably would have been angry, and I would have
Angry?
gone up to him and started a fight.
Okay.
And we had these moments and these fights a lot, so
Mhm.
I know that there's no solution.
So is
So-
anger the only emotion that you think would have erupted, or was there other emotions that probably could have came out if you didn't suppress?
Like I feel like it's mostly anger, and like there's always other emotions associated with anger. Like if I would feel resentful toward him, and like, yeah, and anger that why can't he just understand me and just love me the way I am,
Mhm.
and why he always wants something extra.
Okay, so it was anger, resentment, and those are the top two emotions that you would have felt.
Yeah.
Any other things that you would have been in tune with in that moment?
I don't know if I would have let myself to go there. I would probably maybe cry because I would feel like powerless, and like I feel like his love for me is conditional, and it's not like before anymore, and it's just like you either gonna have child or like I'm gonna leave you or things like that.
Okay, so it seems it's the conditional or unconditional. It's again that black and white, the no gray area. So then you go back to your work, and you use that kind of you start getting active, and you start doing something that you're incredibly amazing at, which is your work. And so how long did you normally spend, or last night for that matter, how long were you spending working there?
Until I was tired and like I literally were about to fall asleep, like 3 hours maybe.
So 3 hours working, and then you decide to go back upstairs to go to bed. Now, Ben, in those 3 hours, I understand a little bit early off, you were using that time to decompress, and it sounded, I know you didn't use the term, but you mentioned a little bit of reflection of just trying to decompress. What did you do in those 3 hours that Susan was working?
Well, after the self-reflection, I was hoping she would come up so we can talk about that. I can share my feelings, my reflections. We can have more of a civil conversation, but she never did. So I literally just went to bed. And then the next morning, I told her the time of our appointment, and we're here.
Okay. Now it's interesting. So you mentioned, self-reflection and awareness is really great, and both of you have that. Now, you also stated that you were waiting for Susan to come upstairs in that time period. What were you telling yourself during that time, or what were you really feeling? And what was crossing your mind? I know you mentioned you were waiting, but what was going on with you while you were waiting? What were the things that you were really processing?
I guess the hope came back a little bit.
Okay.
Since I was more leveled, I guess processed more, I was calm, so I was more hopeful, the conversation going in a positive direction, or at least getting some insight, or just a better understanding of where she was coming from, instead of just like yelling at each other or snapping at each other. And I guess since like that all happened in a matter of like 3 to 4 hours, and I went through a lot of emotions, like I was upset, well first I was anxious, and I was upset, and then hopeless, and then kind of semi-content, and then hopeful, and then mad again. So I feel like I went through all of these emotions so fast, and the fact that they were so intense, it was exhausting for me.
It's draining, having so much, and especially, having this conversation is already draining in itself. So to have all those emotions. Now, you mentioned the hopefulness. What brings those? Oh no, it's okay. Okay, thank you guys. I apologize for having to change rooms. Now, Ben, you were telling me how you were feeling hopeful when you went up to the room. There was a lot of emotions that were happening, but at the end you were feeling hopeful. So what brought that hope to you?
I was hopeful that maybe we could get somewhere in the conversation, because by that time, I think like an hour and a half had passed, so I had processed my feelings. I was in a better mindset a little bit. I was more calm, so I was hoping to talk with Susan about it, but she never came upstairs, so I just got upset, got hopeless again, and then I just went to bed.
Now, what were some of the things that you were imagining, or that you were visualizing, that you were seeing? What were you making sense of that hopefulness?
I don't know. I didn't really think exactly what Susan will say and like how she would respond. I was thinking more of how I was gonna respond. I was gonna be more, try to be more understanding, open, to hearing her reasonings and really trying to empathize with her. And I'm open to talking about waiting, but I feel like we have completely different like perspectives of how long we should wait. So I was hopeful in how I was going to approach the conversation, not necessarily what she would say or do, more of what I would say or do. And then when she didn't come, I was just annoyed.
Now, what kind of emotions were you thinking that you were going to be having with that different approach to Susan?
I was happy.
You were going to be happy. And what other things were you imagining yourself feeling with this new approach to Susan? So you were going to be feeling happy. What else were you kind of going through in your mind?
Honestly, just happy because like if we were to have that conversation, I was gonna be happy about the fact that we just had that conversation. Just like the point that we were able to get over that hump, and like we got somewhere. Even if it's not the best outcome, at least we were able to move from just yelling in each other's faces.
I see. And then once that hope, you mentioned that it went down again, and then you just went to sleep. So in between then, what had happened in your mind and your emotions that it kind of all went downhill once again?
So I thought it was unfair because I was upstairs processing, thinking about the situation, taking time to self-reflect and really be aware of my emotions and actions, whereas Susan was just downstairs working, completely not paying attention to what was going on. She thought everything was irrelevant, and then the fact that she didn't come up made me feel as if she didn't care. I was putting in all this effort for what? She didn't care. She didn't prioritize it. She didn't want to talk about it. She had better things going on. She didn't care how I felt or how she made me feel. So all of those thoughts made me angry and upset because it's like, why am I wasting my time?
Okay, so in that not small time, but in that amount of time between feeling hopeful and then going to sleep, what kind of feelings? I know you said you were mentioning a lot about you were thinking of Susan being downstairs. When you were thinking those thoughts about Susan, what was going on with your own emotions?
I was upset.
You were upset, and that triggered being even more upset. And when you went to sleep, were you asleep already before Susan came in?
Yeah, I was.
Okay.
I had fell asleep probably an hour before.
Okay. And now is it something that you guys have done previously? Do you talk about the fight before you go to sleep, or sometimes do you not even discuss it and you just go right to bed?
We just like, it depends. It varies between times. So.
Some nights when we have energy, we still fight. And other nights we're just sleep.
Okay.
Well, I mean, the fact that he only, like, our relationship right now is just only about child, and all we talk about is about a child, like if we're gonna have a child or not, are we gonna have it, when we're gonna have it, like let's plan it, like everything. And I feel like that's how he values me these days. Like he doesn't really see me anymore, and all he wants from me is a kid. Like at some point, at some level, I feel that he looks at me like a I don't know, child making machine. And and like we barely talk about anything else these days.
And when you have those feelings, right, because that's how you're perceiving the way Ben is looking at you, what immediately is happening? How do you make sense of those thoughts that you believe that he's having of you?
Well, I feel like there are like different things, scenarios that comes to my mind. I don't really want to talk to him because I get mad and like we get into a bigger fight, and like I don't want that, and I want to avoid it because I usually have to go to work early in the morning, and I'm like, this conversation is going nowhere, so why would I even waste my time? But like the scenarios is like he is either want to sabotage my career because he at some level is insecure about my success at work, or maybe he just wants kid and there's no love between us anymore, and he just want to have that kid, and like so he can like give that build up love that he has inside of him to another human being without like being a cheater or like leaving me.
I think that's
So-
kind of extreme.
So when you
Well, these are the things that you make me feel when you constantly
I
talk
just
about a
want to have a
kid.
kid.
No, Susan,
Exactly.
when you think about those things, when you think that Ben might be, you know, trying to get in the way of your career, seeing you as, you know, almost like a baby machine, or that's where he has his love for, how is that making you, what are kind of the emotions that you're feeling with those
Used.
thoughts? Used.
I
okay.
feel used, and I feel like the one person that is the closest to me and is supposed to like understand me better than anyone else is trying to put me down and pull me down, and like that's how I really feel about getting
so
pregnant.
almost this pull, this attachment.
Yeah, kinda.
Okay. And then that same night, I know you mentioned you were working for, you know, those few hours. What did you do after you were working, after you finished, you know?
Well,
doing that
obviously I
job?
was working, but it was like I had all these thoughts in the back of my head, and it's not like I was fully focused, but I didn't really like spend time to go over the thoughts and let them come to my mind. So
Mhm, mhm.
I was like keep myself busy with something else so I don't have to like directly think about them, but they were like making me anxious. Like the feelings were there even though like I was trying to avoid the thoughts. So yeah, and after a while we had to go back, and I mean I went upstairs and he was asleep, and I was like, okay, thank God we don't have to talk about it anymore, because I know like this is, as I said, it's like a black and white. Either I have to like accept to have a baby, or
Mhm.
either he has to accept to wait a few more years.
And those feelings that you were mentioning that you know you have to put down, and you know you weren't letting them come out. Have you let those emotions come out since yesterday evening? Have you thought about those emotions, or have you still suppressed, or you know, kept them?
I feel like if you start talking about that issue, the emotion's gonna come out again.
Mhm.
But like we avoid talking about it, so we can just like sit next to each other
It
without
takes a lot
feeling
of
each other.
energy.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so then that night when you went to bed, what were some of the things that you were thinking? You went upstairs and you knew, and Ben was already asleep. What was going on through your head? What were you making sense of this entire evening?
Well, honestly, I just said whatever, and like I pushed everything down like inside of me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, like it was like, you know, I was so tired and exhausted, and I didn't really have the energy to go over my feelings, and I knew I wasn't happy. I fell asleep when I wasn't happy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But yeah, and I mean I woke up with a really bad shoulder pain, so I know like I was stressed.
Right.
It's just I wasn't consciously thinking about them.
And in addition to those stresses that, you know, this topic is very heavy, and the cause of stresses, if you had to label some of those emotions that you were feeling, what would be if you had to put a word to some of them, what would that be?
Stressful,
Mm-hmm.
feeling used,
Mm-hmm.
feeling unvalued, and feeling like on top of everything else that I have to put up with at work as a woman, I have to put up with that at home too. So it's just like a lot of emotions stirred up inside of me, and like makes me feel like no matter how hard I try, nobody can see it, and people have like different expectations. At work I have to be a different character, at home I have to be this perfect mom and like wife who is willing to give her husband a child, and like all those responsibilities adding together make me feel so exhausted.
Right. And you mentioned that you feel like no one can see it.
Mm-hmm.
Is that something, when you feel like no one can see these efforts that you're putting in, what's happening when you recognize that no one can see it? What's happening within you?
I feel helpless.
Okay.
Like I'm not, I feel like nobody can actually see me or my efforts,
Mm-hmm.
so it feels like I'm draining and nobody can even hear me.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And that's a lot of heavy emotion as well. And then you that night just went to bed, and the next morning, then tell me, how is that like? Because I know you guys have gone to bed now, you haven't discussed the issue since the argument, so what's the next day like for you?
I woke up before her. We didn't really talk. We just had breakfast. I just told her the time of our appointment today, and it was very brief small talk.
Okay.
And then we just went on with our days.
Now that's, that's a lot to handle as well in the morning, just because you haven't gone through any of that or, discussed it. You haven't really been able to debrief from all of that. Such a mix of emotions, especially, for the both of you. Now, next week, what I would like to get into is get a little bit more to understand the relationship between you guys. I know there's, this presenting situation that we have right now, but next week I'd like to go a little bit into how you guys met. And I know you said you've been dating for a long time. There's been a lot of, great conversation between you guys previously and still now. So that's something that we can get into. So I wanted to say thank you, Susan and Ben, for coming in today.
Thank you.
I appreciate you guys coming in.
Thanks.
Thanks.